people put these false senses of franticness on themselves, especially when they launch a business. But I think if you prioritize your lifestyle, maybe it'll take you a year longer over a 10-year period. But still, you've done a lot of cool shit leading up to that because you prioritize your lifestyle, your relationship, things like that. And you still will get to the same end. It just might take slightly longer, and that's okay.
All right, guys, welcome back to the Untrapped Entrepreneur Podcast, Season 2, which you all know is about being married and being an entrepreneur. I was just telling Neel before the show, I think you're going to be our youngest tenured married person. I don't know if that's the
Yep.
correct grammatically, but yeah, Neel's been married a grand total of how many months?
8 months now. I got married in March this year, so 8 months.
8 months. Okay. I'm sure everything
Yeah.
is perfect. He's going to tell us like what.
Ben, you're telling me like, oh, tell us like all the hard stuff. Like, I don't know, it's fine. I don't know what you guys are talking about. This is easy.
No problems over here, man. Yeah. End of show. No traps whatsoever.
Yeah,
Um,
done. 1 minute.
well, hey, so on season 1, I had ChatGPT do intros, and AI is catching up really quickly. And so just by typing your name into Google, generative AI on Google is now writing me an intro for you without me even telling it anything. So I'm just going to read this off, and you
No
see
way.
how good generative AI is at
Okay, cool.
describing Neel here. So it says Neel Parekh is the founder and CEO of Made This, a company that helps homeowners and short-term rental hosts with their cleaning needs. He built the business from the ground up with a fully remote team. Parekh is also the host of the Remote Local podcast, which explores the intersection of travel and entrepreneurship. The podcast features Parekh and David Lahav, two seven-figure entrepreneurs who run their local businesses remotely. That's what generative AI from Google says about Neel. What do you think?
So, first of all, on point. It's funny because there's another guy named Neil Parekh, same spelling as mine,
Uh-huh.
who's a doctor in Cleveland. And the only reason I know this is because I get his emails sometimes. And I started just kind of messing with him back, just because like people will say, "Hey, like Neil, what do you think about these slides?" And I'll like comment on the slides and send it back.
Yeah.
So I was half expecting this to be about a doctor in Cleveland named Neil Parekh,
Like,
but
hey,
luckily, no, they nailed it.
hey, Neel, I have this GI issue. Can you sort this out for me, Doc? Yeah.
Yeah, surgery needed ASAP. Here you go.
All right. What gaps do you want to fill in to tell us a little bit more about your business before we start talking about being married?
Yeah, that was, by the way, the AI did a solid job there. Was that on Bard or was that
No,
literally
it's
from
just
Google.com?
straight up google.com, and I turned on the generative AI, and it says generative AI is experimental. Info quality may vary. So I'm surprised we didn't pick up the doctor on this one.
Yeah, that's solid. That's solid. So it did fantastic on it. I think the only thing I left out is I run a franchise now. So I'm not sure if I mentioned that or not. I started
Mm-mm.
my corporate location as a side hustle in 2013. So about a decade ago, I was working in private equity at the time. 2 years as a side hustle, I finally quit my job and booked a one-way flight down to South America and started traveling. Literally where you are right now, Ben. So I booked
Mm-hmm.
my flight down to Colombia, and I know you're posted up there right now, which is
Yeah.
really cool. So I did that and was a nomad for about 7 years. And yeah, the rest of it, I think it nailed it pretty well. We're in about 20 locations nationally right now. Made this as a fully remote Airbnb and residential cleaning franchise concept.
Very cool. Yeah, and I forgot to mention that for those of you that watch the Untrapped Entrepreneur on video, you're like, where the heck is Ben? So I am in Bogota, Colombia, and because Neel is a very special guest, he runs a remote local podcast. He's all about being remote. And I was telling him earlier, like when Neel's in LA, it's like that's boring, Neel. I'm like, dude, you're like, what are you doing there? So I always picture you globetrotting, but I'm going to go ahead and just tell a little lie here, Neel. I flew down to Bogota just for this podcast so I can impress you and be kind of in touch and sync with the remote local
I like it.
listeners.
Really capture your inner nomad, and therefore you can deliver on this podcast. I like it.
That's right. I was trying to impress you. Well, we're both in the franchising business, and so it
Hmm.
is an interesting business. Again, before we dive into some of the marriage stuff, how is you've been doing this a while, like 10 years, starting as a side hustle. How did the pandemic affect you and in your business? Did it help you? Did you grow during the pandemic? Did you not? Tell us a little bit more about that.
So during the pandemic, let's talk about my home office location because franchising we hadn't even started at that time. Business definitely went down because we were focused a lot on Airbnbs and vacation rentals. So with that, a lot of Airbnbs and travel just went offline. Some of the larger clients we work with went out of business. So definitely affected it. Luckily, we also focus on residential cleaning. And cleaning is one of those industries where no matter what, people need it. Even in a pandemic, what's happening? People are moving out. People need sanitation cleaning. Some things stop, other things begin. Things get dirty all the time, right? So we kind of shifted gears, focused a lot more on residential homes, a lot more on property managers, move out cleanings, disinfection cleanings, things like that. At the same time, business definitely went down. I think we were at 2 million at the time at the start of the pandemic per year in revenue. And we probably went down to like 1.1 by
Mm,
year end, right? So pretty significant cut. Um, but business didn't totally go away. And I think we found a, kind of retooled a lot. Definitely in that time, I think a lot of things we were doing were inefficient pre-pandemic, and post-pandemic, you come out of it being like, "Hey, I need to know where every single dollar is going. I need to know where target market is. We need to beef up our profit margins." So I think there's a lot of retooling which happened, which is really really good.
mm.
But yeah, we survived the pandemic and are focused a little bit more on residential now than before.
Gotcha. And then you started franchising during the pandemic?
Yeah, so we got our FDD and all that good stuff set up in like January 1st, 2020. And we're like, perfect, let's go out to market around like March or so. And of course, the world broke right then. So, an Airbnb cleaning franchise in the middle of the pandemic when no one's traveling, difficult. But we actually had one franchise buy, who's someone who I knew
Mm,
in 2020 and just grown since then.
gotcha. Well, you're a glutton for punishment because you started franchising in the pandemic. You got married during the pandemic-ish, right? Depends on when I don't know
Mm-hmm.
when the thing, we kind of know when it started. We don't know when it ended because it seems like, people keep trying to keep it going. But
Yeah.
you did a lot during a time when, some of my friends just like moved to Montana for like 2 years and hung out and did nothing.
Yeah.
Um, so along that journey, you did get married. Tell us about when you met your
Mm-hmm.
wife, how you met your wife, and then sounds like you got married about 8 months ago, so beginning of 2023.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
So we got engaged a few months before that. I met her late 2020, so middle of pandemic as well. I was back in the US, not traveling. It felt really weird because I was on the road for 5+ years. So I came back and I was like, oh, I can't wait to leave again. I
Mm.
was kind of just around LA and kind of getting used to being back in the States. So of course, what do you do when you're a single guy? Swipe, right? I was just on the dating apps. So we met on a dating app called Hinge sometime in 2020. At that time, I was kind of going around the US. So I was in New York for a while. She was actually from LA. So we texted for like 3 months and it was fantastic. And then I came back and we met up and I was like, dude, this is it. Like I'm totally set. I'm bought in. I just got to convince her I'm bought in though.
Yeah.
And then we just started dating from there. So end of 2020 is when we met.
Gotcha. Okay, so this is a personal fascination of mine because I've been with my wife since we were 16 years old. And
Mm-hmm.
way back when, like there was internet, but there weren't dating apps, I don't think.
Yeah.
um, I'm fascinated by this whole dating app thing. And so my perspective, and I want to hear yours on this. My
Yeah.
perspective is if I'm 40 years old, if I'm 40 and I'm single, I would immediately go to dating apps, like because
Yeah,
I
for
would just
sure.
think like scientifically, like they've thought through all of these matches. They've had like 20 years of screwing things up and tweaking the algorithm, going, okay, that relationship didn't work out, and here's why. And they gave us feedback, and they've been like fine tuning this machine. I feel like I could find, a match m- more quickly online than I could just, I don't know, hanging out wherever. Um, is that where like you naturally went, like, okay, I'm going to go to dating app, or did you exhaust all other resources? How did that happen?
No, it's a funny cultural shift that happened. Where I guess since Tinder came on the scene, and look, they're dating apps before that, but it was never socially okay. Somehow, right when Tinder happened, and that was around the time it became socially okay to be on dating apps.
Hmm.
So ever since then, it's become a very big shift in how people think about dating. In some ways, it's worse, right? Because in some ways, it's like for example, I was in New York. You could go on a date every single day if you wanted to, right? But because you have access to so much supply, meaning other
Mhm.
people, people don't feel the need to commit. Versus, let's say you meet someone serendipitously, and you're like, I'm a high school sweetheart with them, or I met them at some play or a bookstore. It feels a little bit more special, I would say, where maybe you feel like it's serendipity. This is meant to happen. We actually meant to meet up.
Mhm.
With an app, a lot of supply, you have a lot of options. So I feel like everyone's mentality has kind of changed. Where, especially in New York, I always hear the most common complaint: people don't settle down. You don't need to. There's unlimited options. You just keep going, trying to find the better and better one, as opposed to seeing what you already got.
Mhm.
That's the downside of it. The pro of it is, you can go on a date every single day if you want to,
Yeah.
right? So there's definitely that side of it too.
I guess that's the law of large numbers, right? If you go on so many dates, one is bound to be a good fit. I'm curious about this
Yeah.
as an entrepreneur. Did you like lay it out there either on the profile up front or on that first date where you're like, hey, I'm an entrepreneur. I'm crazy. I just want to let you know, like, my brain operates differently than most of the rest of the world. Did you kind of like lay it all out and say, are you sure you want to do this? Or was it more subtle than that?
Interesting. No, I did not. I put entrepreneur on there, and honestly, I didn't really give that big of a consideration for it. And but like I've thought about this a lot because people often say like entrepreneurs, we're an interesting breed. Like we do X, Y, and Z. We do X, Y, and Z. And I've never had that experience as much, as far as I know. Right? Like I probably have a lot of these characteristics of entrepreneurs, which are very strange for people who are not in the business world. But I don't think I have like overwork. I don't think I have these like crazy things idea that a lot of entrepreneurs get into. Therefore, like having that as a disclaimer almost felt very unnecessary for me.
Mhm.
If anything, it's a pro because like I have as much flexibility as I want. Right. Of course, if I don't work as much, I'm not going to make as much money and maybe not achieve the goals I want to. But at least with the way I've set things up, I have a ton of flexibility. So for me, it wasn't really a disclaimer. If anything, it'd be a check out how cool I am
Yeah.
because I have all this flexibility.
Well, but you're married to a physician, right?
Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
so you have, I would imagine, if I'm going to stereotype physicians, like you have someone that
Mm-hmm.
is process oriented, maybe linear thinker, like science, right? That's like connecting the dots and um, pragmatic. Like there's probably a lot of these qualities that are shared amongst, physicians or accountants or attorneys or whatever. Entrepreneur doesn't seem to match that profile. So for you,
Mm.
was it like an opposites attract, or were there more similarities than meets the eye stereotypically?
Yeah, it's a great question. By the way, it was funny because for anyone not watching this on YouTube, I'm Indian, and of course, I married an Indian doctor. So my parents were like, "Hell yes! Like you
Yes.
did it! Like finally!" So they were pumped.
Neil, we don't care what you do the rest of your life, man. You made it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you made it. You done. You weren't a doctor yourself, but it's okay. You married into one. We're okay with it.
Yeah.
So to your question, how was it in terms of opposites attract? I would say in some realm, like I don't know if I would have wanted to date an entrepreneur. Like they might be a little bit too similar to me. Um, this is strange, like a little bit too motivated.
Hmm.
Like my wife right now, she's obviously very smart. Like I could never be a doctor. Like I'm just not. My brain doesn't work that way. Very sharp, but like also the way she operates is she goes to work and she does what she does and she likes it, and then she comes home and her brain checked out. You literally can't do work at home. Like for HIPAA compliance, you can't do work at home,
Hmm.
right? Versus entrepreneurs, our brains are never shut off. They're never shut off, right? Like even when I go on my walks, like I'm still thinking about work, which in some ways kind of sucks, but they're just never shut off. So actually, if I'm thinking about this a little bit more, I think it was kind of attractive to be with someone who's not an entrepreneur. Like I've dated girls in the past who were in the entrepreneur realm, and you end up talking a lot about business and the problems. And there's pros to that too. They'll get you, they understand you, you get to talk it through with them. But the cons are there's not really a separation. And kind of what I'm noticing now, we've been dating, end of 2020, so about 3 years now, uh, is like I rarely ever talk to her about work, right? Our relationship has nothing to do with that besides maybe how my mood might change or maybe how her mood might change because of her job. It's kind of it, but we don't really hash things out or go deep into like the problems just because like they're kind of not relevant for the other person. For better or worse, they're not really as relevant. So I would say maybe for me it was the opposite attract thing where I just felt our relationship was built on things not work related, which is kind of cool.
Hmm. Well, so one of the traps that we've picked up on season two is when you do have a situation like yours where one person is in the business running the business, the other person is completely out. They're not like helping with the books, they're not helping with marketing, they have
Mm,
their own thing going. And when you meet back up at home and you've had a bad day at work, something didn't go the right way, is that the other person may not have any context because you're not sharing a whole lot or they're not in it with you.
yeah.
Have you ever experienced that? How do you bridge that gap?
Yeah, for sure. And it's like uh, my wife Magna, she might not know why I'm moody, right? Because she has no context of like, oh, this happened at work or this happened at work or like something like that. So I actively bring it up to her, like, hey, I'm moody because of this thing at work, or I'm thinking about this. And then I think she'll understand, like, okay, it's something work related. I get it. What I appreciate is she doesn't try to problem solve it, right?
Hmm.
I think everyone operates a little bit differently, but if someone tries to problem solve it who's not in your world, it becomes a little bit different. Same as like if she had a medical thing she's working on at work and I try to help her out with it, she'd be like, that's my domain. Like, I appreciate it, but I don't appreciate it. Like,
Yeah.
you don't need to problem solve it. So I think that little tidbit of communicating, hey, I'm feeling this way because of this, has helped out a lot. Before, I'd always just like my defaults of something's pissing me off at work, I go for a walk.
Yeah.
But it's been a shift because I have to let her know that hey, it's not anything that you've done; it's the situation of what I'm dealing with, which is making me really frustrated. So yeah,
Okay.
the communication piece has been important.
That's really insightful. So a couple of things. One is you being proactive. Like you had a
Mm-hmm.
shitty day, and you're like, "Hey, just FYI, this is what happened today. One of my franchisees, blah blah blah. I'm a
Mm-hmm.
little pissed off." So being proactive instead of them reading your mind because they can't do that. I've tried
Yep.
it with my wife since we were 16. She hasn't been able to read my mind yet. Um, the other thing, though, this doctor example. So I have a middle son who's had 4 open heart surgeries, right? Had open heart surgery that saved his life, and many others. Just had one recently. And I have this fascination with his surgeon. The first surgery
Mm.
he had, 12 hours open heart on a 5-day-old baby with a heart the size of
Yeah.
a walnut, with taking no breaks, no lunch break, no eating, just operating on this little heart.
Yeah.
And you just made me think about that. Like if Dr. Tam came home to his wife and he's like, "Man, the surgery didn't go as I had hoped. I'm really pissed off." And the wife's like, "Well, Vincent, did you think about using this scalpel instead of this scalpel?" Right? Like her trying to weigh in on that.
Yeah.
It's kind of like I could see the face he would look at her and go, "What? Like
Just get out of my domain. Like, please don't do.
just
Yeah.
let me have a bad night. I don't need to be told how to do surgery here."
Yeah.
Um,
Exactly. So
uh,
I've never really thought about it, but I guess you're alluding to something which is totally correct because our relationship was not really built on a work foundation, anyways. We kind of avoid that topic because it's just not relevant for both of us.
mhm.
Therefore, a lot of our relationships built on things not work related, including the problems we talk about are going to be non work related problems. And I don't know if that's like I guess I don't know the other side of it as well about like if someone is an entrepreneur, you're an entrepreneur, someone's a doctor, and you're a doctor as well, what those conversations might be like.
Mhm.
But in some ways, it's kind of refreshing. I come home, I'm not talking about business. It's
Mhm.
just literally anything else because my partner does not care about business. She'll support me, but she doesn't really care about it.
Yeah. Well, okay, so here's when I feel like I have a need to go to my wife to talk about business, and she has been very involved in the business from day one, but
Hmm.
not so much. I've been much more involved over the years, and she's kind of filled in a lot of the gaps. But I find that I go to her for these like big strategic, like I'm thinking about doing something totally different or totally new. Kind of, what do you think? And I find myself doing that because in some cases, especially in the past, not so much now, but in the past, it's like I didn't have anyone else to talk to. I didn't have a board of
Hmm.
advisors. I didn't have a business partner. that was doing things alongside me. I didn't have someone like high level um, thinking and strategy that was inside the business. And so it was like she was the only one I trusted that knew about the
Yeah.
business, that knew me. Um, do you have an outlet? Do you have like an entrepreneur group? Do you have a business partner? Do you have somebody that you can like pitch and catch with and get all of that out as to kind of help you synthesize and think through things?
Yes, I do. And by the way, that's great insight as well. So actually, 10 years ago, I started the business with my mother.
Mm,
So she wanted to do something at home. I was working full time. I said, "Hey, why don't we just partner on this so you could actually help out with a lot of the stuff?" She's actually a part owner in my LA based business, not the franchise. But I totally see what you're talking about because at the beginning, every decision I'd go through with her and talk with her about it,
mhm,
right? Because like I don't have a coach or anything. You're just going to work on talking with them about that. So I definitely see that side of it. Ever since 2016, though, I've always hired coaches. I always have a business coach. Or mastermind group or business coach or anything, even right now. So that's typically my outlet now. Now, if I think about this a little bit more, if it was the beginning of my entrepreneurial journey and I met my spouse then, I would probably lean to her for more of her guidance or thoughts and things around that time.
mhm,
Now that I was kind of more experienced, like I met her when I was, 8 or 7 years into business, I knew how to find that information with other people, specifically people who are already ahead of me. So I haven't really needed her advice unless it's something more personnel related,
mhm.
like this person on my team or this person on my team. Like, what do you think I should do in this situation? I think I lean on her for that advice because that has nothing to do exactly with business. It's more about the human element, and she kind of knows me as well. So yeah, I to your question, Ben, directly, I always get to my coaches and network first for business stuff before I reach out to her.
Interesting. I'm actually shocked that coaches have not come up yet in season two. So
Hmm.
I want to dive into that a little bit deeper because what I'm seeing is you could kind of put people in a few different buckets. You know, they're working the business with their spouse, their partners, like they're dividing and conquering, and they're doing it every day together. And there's problems associated with that. There's pluses and minuses. Um, that's one scenario. Another one is I'm married and my spouse has no idea what I even do for a living, or they're just completely out of the business. Like I don't rely on them for anything. We meet at home and we talk about home and personal life stuff. And then there's kind
Hmm.
of like the moonlighting where my spouse is involved as like maybe they're involved early on or they're an advisor in the business. They have a vested interest clearly in it. They want to be up to date on things, but they're not operating. So one of those three buckets. I think, and I'm the beneficiary of coaching too for a very long time.
Hmm.
Um, I think you could use a coach in any one of those three scenarios. And so for those of you that are listening, you're going to find yourself in one of these buckets. And if you don't have a coach, never had a coach, and you're having issues with your spouse, and there are different issues, right? It's like we're working the business every day and we don't agree on things. That could be a
Hmm.
coach. My spouse has no idea what I do for a living. I've met some of these people where they're like, I have no idea what he does. I'm like, you don't know what he does. They're like, no, I have no idea. He just pays the mortgage and like, that could be problematic where you have like no clue.
Hmm.
A coach could
Right.
maybe help bridge that gap because at some point, if the husband comes home or the wife comes home and says, we're not going on vacation, we're not doing this, the business is failing, that could be a huge shocker. And there needs to be something there to kind of keep the information flow going. Um,
So you're saying a coach for for the couple
I'm
at
just
that point.
saying, like, coach, period. I had a coach that was a family and business coach. He was kind of a rare breed. He was
Hmm.
Tony Robbins' business partner over 20 years, one of his platinum
Hmm.
partners, like, high level guy. He was an expert at like suicide prevention, business coaching, built many multi-million dollar businesses and life coaching. And so we had
Yeah.
this benefit of like, he like covered the gamut. And I don't know what our life would just be totally different, but I just think if you are operating a business and you're married and you've never had coaching, wouldn't you recommend wouldn't you recommend that coaching of some kind?
Yeah. 100. I mean, I guess I've never even thought about it from a couple perspective, but I think it makes so much sense. Like now, anything I do in life, I just get a coach because it's a cheat code. Definitely. And I remember reading a quote sometime. It definitely was not me coming up with this idea, but you can't expect your spouse to be your best friend, your lover, your therapist, your business partner, everything. It's just such unfair pressure on your
Hmm.
spouse to do that. So if your spouse is already your best friend and your therapist, let's say, don't make them your business coach or business confidant as well. Hire someone out for that. Or if you're sick of being a therapist for your spouse and you think it's detrimental to the relationship, hire a therapist. That's the same as a coach, right? So hiring specialties so you don't put as much pressure on the relationship, I think makes so much sense. In terms of just like personal sanity, I know people who never have coaches and they're fine with it. I think I'm just generally an overthinker and I have to talk it out loud with people and tell people like, Neil, you're overthinking it. Just do this. And
Hmm.
I'll say, okay, cool. Like thank you. That's great for me. So I could see some people maybe not needing it, but it's almost like 9 out of 10 people should have a coach, in
Yeah.
my opinion, in business.
Well,
It's just for the sake of the spouse and like everything. It just makes so much sense.
it does. I think for people that have been together a long time, you have this like this bond and this story that you do everything together. And so
Mm,
you like, we do everything together. So I'm going to tell you everything, and that you are going to be my lover and business coach and therapist and all of that. And that could, you're totally right. I found that out firsthand. It could be very unhealthy because it's like, hey, go get a business coach. Go find, like, I
yeah.
can't help you with that. I just want to be this. So I think that's really, really sage advice coming from a guy, that's only been married 8 months. Who knew that Neil would be so insightful here?
Just dropping the wisdom
No,
here.
no
You know,
kidding.
but one thing I was thinking is, as entrepreneurs, we are used to hiring coaches. At least if you haven't hired it, you've heard of the concept. You've heard of mastermind groups. You've heard of like business coaches. It's not abnormal to pay money for someone else's expertise. What I've just realized is people who are, let's say, in the medical field or have a normal 9 to 5, that's an abnormal concept. That's not normal, right? We
Mm.
think that's normal, but that's not normal for people who are not entrepreneurs to be hiring coaches for everything. So I'm just thinking out loud how to go for my wife if I said, hey, let's get a coach together. Now, if it's something for like workout and stuff, it makes sense. But for another area of life or business related, it might feel a little bit strange. Like I think she would be a little bit confused when I bring up the concept of it and think, why do I need it? And that's something where they've been taken for granted how easy it is to convince people to get coaches because you and I, it's a no brainer.
Hmm.
But I think for the majority of the population, it's still a novel concept.
Yeah, well, and especially like from a medical standpoint, it's, well, I either need a therapist or I need no help. Is I like a lot of people's
Right?
probably psychology, and you're right. Like an entrepreneur is, I need a therapist, or I need a coach, or I need no help. And um, that coach, I think you're finding more and more that it is a necessity if you want to get there faster. It's
Mm,
We could all say, look, I'm going to figure it out on my own, and we have a lot of confidence in ourselves. But at this point, with media and newsletters and courses and the ability to access knowledge, they have it used to be Clarity FM. It's like Get Intro now or something. Like you get Mark Cuban on a 15
mm,
minute call for $500 and ask him a
yeah.
question, right? It's just so easy that you're right. I couldn't imagine doing that, but for a non-entrepreneur, it is uncommon. And Neil, I just did something in my company to that point. I am bringing on a coach for all of my leaders inside my locations that
Mm,
I own. They are going through a coaching program now together. I sync them up with a coach. They probably would have never purchased coaching services. They don't even know what coaching
yeah.
services are or why they would get them, and then they're about to find the benefit of all the things that we find a benefit from. Hey, I want to take a pause real quick to talk about Neil's favorite website beyond his own website, his own multiple websites. Neil loves the
Mm-hmm.
gentstore.com. Even though Neil hasn't bought anything from it yet, I got him on the gentstore.com a few minutes ago, and I saw his face. He seemed pretty excited. Wouldn't you say,
I was
Neil?
excited. Oh yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
All right, I could tell. I'm really good at reading body language. I could tell Neil was super excited about this. So, you guys know about the Gent Store? Over 3,000 items that you can shop from. If you're in a market where the Gents place is, 20% of all your purchases go back to an annual membership credit. So spend 1,000 on the site, $200 goes back in the form of annual membership credit. So I think we're going to have sometime in the next year, we're going to have people show up for their membership renewal. and we're going to be able to tell them, Neel, we got you, man. You spent enough money with us. Your membership is taken care of for the year. It's on the house. And so we're hoping that's going to happen here pretty soon, expecting it to happen. But you guys go to thegentstore.com. You can use the code untrapped for free shipping. Neel, did you like if you bought something on the Gent store, do you see anything that catches your eye before we move on here? I see you looking around, man.
I was peeking around, and I don't know if you can see. I got my man bun going. Got the long
Uh-huh.
flowy hair, and I got to get more shampoo for this. So
Okay.
that I was definitely looking at that section over there.
Okay.
There's a ton of stuff there, man. I'm surprised how quickly you guys got that up. The store looks awesome. If I truly, if there was, is there a Jen's place in LA?
Not yet.
Okay, if there was one here, I feel like it's a no brainer. Like free membership, and I get the products I'm going to get on Amazon anyways. Might as well just get both at
We'll
once.
make you a
So I
deal.
loved it,
You
man.
you open a Gents Place franchise, and I'll open a Made This franchise.
Perfect. Yeah, trades.
Um, all right, so wrapping up here, the last 5-10 minutes. Um, when when we're thinking about the listeners here and people that are running their own business and maybe going through, either a difficult time being married and they're like, I can't do both. Like
Mm.
this is crazy for me. Um, we talked about coaching, um, but anything that you've run into, and I granted you've only been together for 3 years, which is a huge accomplishment, by the way, just in general, because marriages are shorter and shorter lasting, unfortunately. Um, what have you specifically run into? Like, what's the hardest thing you've run into as it relates to being an entrepreneur and being married? Is it like, oh my gosh, Saturday again, or you miss date night, or you're traveling again? Like, what's the biggest
Mm.
friction point as an entrepreneur and being married?
You know, I would say it's probably going to be different if and when we have kids, right? Because I think the whole equation changes completely. For me, so far, the biggest friction point has been when we're traveling. When we're traveling, that's her vacation time. I don't have vacation time. I could travel a lot and I could take shorter days, but I always got to be plugged in and be working. So I don't like traveling fast. But on her end, she has a week and a half or a week off. She has to travel fast, meaning I can't work then. So for me, it's a struggle. It makes me kind of anxious. Like maybe I shouldn't feel anxious if I'm
Mm-hmm.
not working, but I do feel anxious if I'm not working on a given day to check in on stuff. It makes me feel like I'm really behind. But that has to be the trade off because she has limited time to travel on vacation, and therefore when I go with her, I have to take that time off. So I feel like the travel types of style, like our style of traveling, is different. Because of that, it does cause a little bit of tension because I say, hey, I can't go to the extra city you want to go to. Please, let's just slow down because I have to work
Mm.
and I can't go hang out with you at all. I think so far that's been the biggest stress because it's just a different type of lifestyle, right? Like there's almost never a day where I don't check in. There's sometimes if I want to go on an excursion, I'm off for 10 days. Sure, that's fine. But like even on a Saturday, I want to hop on my computer for an hour, just see how things are going, just because I want to, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that concept is foreign to someone in a 9 to 5 where they don't have after hours stuff. They're not in like a consulting type of industry where they're always on the clock. So I think that's been a point of tension. Just this different lifestyles when you're working a 9 to 5 versus an entrepreneur.
Yeah. So do you compensate for that, or is there like a hack where you wake up an hour or 2 hours early, or you go to sleep later, or when she's taking a shower, you're like, okay, I got my 20 minutes. Like, are you strategic about taking this time where she doesn't feel you working?
Yeah, oh, for sure. Like if there's days where she has something to do at nighttime, I'm like excited. Like, great, go do something. I could guilt free just work until midnight or 1 a.m. and I'm going to feel fine about it. So I definitely try to take advantage of those times when I can. And honestly, part of it is like my priorities of and where I'm in the business. Like if you're in your first 6 months, maybe you do have to grind it out and there's going to be a little bit more tension because you yourself are putting in the work. After some time, though, I think the wisest decision for everyone would be use leverage in terms of money, profits, whatever, to push back into the business to hire people so you have a little bit more flexibility. That's, in my opinion, the way to keep that compromise going with your spouse. If you're 100% devoted to your business, it's going to be really hard to do that. And I think a lot of people get stuck in that grind phase for
Mm.
way too long. and I'm sure it depends on the business model, but for example, like with Native franchisees, you don't need to be in that grind phase for too long. You could very quickly hire people, right? But there is a small grind phase where it's going to be tough to kind of balance both things. But I think a lot of people just deprioritize leverage and they say, I'm just going to grind this out. And they forget, oh my God, that's sacrificing my relationship. Let me put pieces into place so I actually have flexibility to go on vacation and to take time off if I need
Yeah, it's a really good point too. That I do think this is a trap where as you grow your business, maybe you have to grind it out a lot. You grow your business and you establish a certain amount of income for yourself. If you immediately
to.
consume that income as a couple or as a family and get used to that lifestyle, and that work is not sustainable for you and you alone, then when you do go say, I've had enough, I've got to hire someone, now you're taking
Yep.
a lifestyle step back where it's like, hey, we were going to buy that car, but we can't because we got to hire the COO. Um, I do think if you can be really thoughtful about this, like as you grow your business, you're married, you've got kids, whatever that personal situation you're in, is when you take that leap up and the business grows and you have that additional income, instead of looking to consume it right away, it's who can I hire to reduce my work time in the business or reduce my operational
Yep.
time in the business. So you may love what you do and you want to spend as much time as possible, but does it mean you should be running your own Google ad still, or should you hire someone to do that so you can think about strategy? But I've seen it and I've felt it myself where if you could start consuming that income right away, knowing that you're going to need to hire someone to do that job, it sucks, man. It sucks to tell your wife or your husband, hey, we really need to hire someone. We need to kind of pull some things back so that my life is easier or our life is better. It's a lot easier to not have it in the first, not consume it in the first place.
Yeah, well said. Just think about your business as an investment. And until it's running in a certain number of hours, which lets you have some flexibility, put money back into it, right? Just to let it grow. That'll, in my opinion, my short opinion is being married will help out the married life a lot too.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Okay, wrapping up, man. One piece of advice, anyone that's I don't know, they're Neel from a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years
Mm.
ago. They're about to get married. They just started their business. They've had a business for a couple of years. Any do's or don'ts, must haves, must nots, anything like that, those parting words for our audience.
Sure. And I don't know if what I'm about to say is going to be demotivational and making people not grow as fast, but in my opinion, prioritizing lifestyle above simply business growth is key. Money's always going to be there, and you could grow faster later or slower later if you want. Like the speed's totally up to you. It's not like, oh my God, I lost time right now because I went on this vacation with my spouse. Now my business is screwed. That never exists. But people put these false senses of franticness on themselves, especially when they launch a business. But I think if you prioritize your lifestyle, maybe it'll take you a year longer over a 10-year period. But still, you've done a lot of cool shit leading up to that
Mm-hmm.
because you prioritize your lifestyle, your relationship, things like that. And you still will get to the same end. It just might take slightly longer, and that's okay. And that's always been my philosophy is I will always prioritize lifestyle and my personal things I want to do with myself and my spouse over just business growth. And could we have grown faster as made this if I just focused on the business? 1,000%. We probably would have grown faster. But that's not my goal, right? And I do think that would be detrimental to what my wife and I want out of life if I was just focused on business growth.
Yeah, and I follow you on Twitter, Neel, and I've seen this message from you over and over again, and from several others that I really respect. Is that like, hey, I'm not trying to be a billionaire. I'm not trying to be Elon Musk. I'm not trying to be anybody else that the public maybe puts out there as successful. Is you've got your own priorities, your own lifestyle that you want to live, and you're working that, and so. Not comparing yourself to all of these other people and make you feel behind and that you need to grow fast. That guy's growing fast. I need to grow fast. Is something that I've seen and admiring you and the message that you put out there. I think more of that needs to be put out. So thank you for doing that.
I appreciate it, man.
Yeah.
Appreciate it, Ben.
Well, hey, thanks for hopping on the show, Neel, and thanks for having me on your show as well. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, man. Thanks so much for having me, Ben. And for anyone listening, if you want to follow my podcast, it's called the Remote Local Podcast. Although we might go through a rebrand soon, but for right now, it's the Remote Local Podcast, and you can find us online.
And then what's your Twitter handle?
It's Neel B. Parekh. We'll maybe drop it in the show notes, but try not
Yeah.
to follow the other Dr. Neel. I know he's on Twitter as well. He's in Cleveland. I'm not a doctor. That's the other guy.
That's right. You could get your honorary doctorate from your wife, maybe.
There we go. Yeah, that's how it works, right? I could do surgeries after this.
Yeah, exactly. All right, brother. Thanks for your time.
All right,
All
thanks,
right, see
man.
ya.